Welcome to the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Manchester. Join me in this sacred space for exploring the journey of spiritual awakening in the everyday and the ordinary. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our new releases. So let's go ahead and dive into today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Manchester, and my guest today is Cindy Lusk, my dear Sadhana sister. Hi, Cindy.
Hi.
So in lieu of a long-winded, beautiful bio that you have, I think we'll just start with our history. We met at the yoga workshop here in Boulder, Colorado. We think maybe around 1989-90. And both became teachers there and deep seekers. We can see that kind of that thread that started way back then in the physical form of the practice, Ashtanga Vinyasa. But we also had this, the tutelage of Richard Freeman that, did bring in beautiful understanding of pranayama and even the idea of what this central channel, how we could feel that through our breath. So we were really lucky to start there and to find each other and to dive into many, many years now of just finding that we're on the same path together. Yeah?
Yes.
It's been, it's like you have been sort of just like this, like lean into Cindy kind of thing. Where's Cindy going? Like just from all of our teachers, we really have found ourselves on the same path.
Yeah.
Which
From
is
the yoga workshop into, that's where we met John Friend before he was on Asara. He was an Iyengar teacher. And, he came in and started talking about, for me, it was really revolutionary to hear him start talking about the tantric philosophy that really resonated very deeply with me. And so
yeah,
I was into that.
I feel the same way. It was like, wow, what is he talking about? This is, it had so much like longing in it for me that I was like, oh, this language of the Tantra, which, we can dive into today is like, well, what is that language? And why is it so enticing? What is it about the Tantric tradition that we really fell in love with?
Yeah. And one of the beautiful things about John was him bringing in all these other teachers like Douglas Brooks and Sally Kempton and Paul Muller-Ortega and others. But those are the ones that I think we both also followed up with, learning from them individually as well.
Yeah. I think, speaking to Richard the other day, as I told you, and, I said to him that sometimes it's pain that draws us to a path. Sometimes it's loss. Sometimes it's we are struggling. Maybe we don't know it in our early years. Like I'm not sure that I could verbalize it like I can now, but the pain of growing up in an alcoholic family, and then I would walk into the yoga workshop and I would feel like I had come home, like to myself. Hear my breath. I could feel my emotions. I could settle into some silence. I'm curious for you, how did you get to the yoga workshop?
Well, it was exactly something similar. And I actually talk about this. We'll get around to talking about my book, but I kind of start my book with, how I found myself in a horrible breakup, a romantic breakup. And I had taken yoga in college. An Iyengar teacher, really beautiful teacher, but I hadn't taken it since then. And this is just as an aside for anyone who's a teacher, you never know when you're planting a seed. Like you might teach someone and never see them again, and then they end up becoming a yoga teacher later on. It's kind of interesting. But so when I had this breakup, I thought there's something in me that said, yoga, you need yoga. And so I sought out a teacher, and it was actually Chris Burnson. I don't know if you remember him.
Mm.
And then he, got me hooked up with Richard eventually. And then I'll tell you, just to follow up on this theme of, suffering and tragedy, kind of causing us to wake up. And we don't, you know, it's unfortunate that sometimes we wait until there's tragedy to wake up, because we don't, we could wake up when we're happy too. But, it was after my mom passed away that I sought out Paul Muller Ortega.
Mm.
I was sort of like, okay, I'm ready for something more serious now in a way, or something that's really gonna uh, shift things for me. So that's
Yeah,
when I started studying
maybe
with Paul.
maybe somewhere down the path of our yoga asana careers and practices, we realize that there's something more to
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
For me, it was well, I was going through perimenopause,
Hmm.
and I didn't really understand that I was getting these headaches, and would go to my sister. She would do cranial work on me, and I would feel better. But then they would come back the next month, and you know, hormones were plugging. Now I can say that for certainty. And um, my nervous system was not regulated.
Mm.
So it was about that time that I think you were like, Jeannie, Paul's coming to town. You oughta like jump on the bandwagon. And I love that about your our sisterhood, that you've always been sort of like, come on, next steps, next steps. Um, so I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for your guidance and your tutelage over the years and continuously.
Yeah.
Um, so, pain is the portal. I remember Sally Kempton saying, you got to go through the lens of Dhumavati, who is this goddess of, she's the old hag that no one
Mm.
wants to look at. And she is, she's not going anywhere. She's not doing anything. And she's not very pretty to look at.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean just old age. It means loss, grief,
Mm.
the underworld, and how that is often the case, that we seek more depth.
Yeah.
Um, so I
Mm.
think we both kind of had that, whatever it was. Maybe it was, this transitionary time in life that we sought more. There was
Mhm.
more, and Richard always instilled that there was more.
Mhm.
And I was raising kids at the time, and maybe a little resistant to going inside myself, but always, I think that maybe this is a good time to talk about the hand of grace, because I think when I think about just the path that we've been on, we have this teaching from our teacher Paul Muller Ortega in
Mhm.
Neelakantha Meditation, that the hand of grace is real.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if you might dive into that topic. Like, what is the hand of grace? How do you see that in your life, in your path to this time?
Mhm.
From maybe even childhood to
Yeah.
to this
Well,
time.
there's so many interrelated concepts, there's karma and um what we come into this lifetime with. Um, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, no effort is ever lost. And, from previous lifetimes, sometimes I think some of us are born ready to pick up the path and continue with it. And there's also the notion of adhikara, of kind of, being ready to receive something. It's the way I think about that. And that in a way is what we do with our practice, is we kind of prepare the ground so that then grace can be received.
Hmm.
Because what's frustrating to me about grace is that we can't make it happen, which is, kind of an interesting thing for me, because I am very like to try and make things happen. I like to be very organized and, clear about what I'm doing and so forth. And really, we were talking before we got on about the malas a little bit, and our experience of them. And one of the malas is the karma mala, which is this doership of trying to make things happen. And I feel like that's can be a real block for me sometimes, to keep trying to make things happen rather than to just open up and allow grace to carry me, you know, wherever I need to be going. Like, for example, as we're talking, we kind of consciously decided not to try and, make it a stringent, outline or anything like that, but to just let grace carry us where it's going to carry us. So
Mm.
for me, it is that, it's just like we learned in Anasara, opening to grace, which was always just this kind of mysterious, like so for me, it was always like, well, what do I do to open to grace? Like, it just was so hard for me to figure out, like, and trying to figure it out. It's just such an interesting thing when it's just really doing the practice and preparing the soil, planting the seeds, and then waiting for the sun to come out and, the rain to fall, and letting all those circumstances unfold in their own kind of natural way. That's the way I think about it. I would love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, no, I think I think many of us, even many of you listening, are probably going, well, yeah, I like to drive. I like to be in charge. I want to be the driver. I think there's some sort of false sense of security that we get from thinking that we can drive everything in life. When I think back on the hand of grace, we have this, when we study in Neelakantha, we have this pine forest sage recognition exercise. And when I went back to look at, and the exercise is to kind of look at the hand of grace. Well, how did you get here now? And I go all the way back to like childhood, to being in my rocking chair and praying. And, really at that time, my family wasn't super religious, but I did go to Sunday school and I learned to pray. And I had a prayer practice, and I think, well, where did that come from? I also was in love with the nuns, like what was that? I didn't really have a life where that was where my parents were putting me. Until I asked to go to this particular school that was Catholic. It was like, wow, what is that? The other thing that I think that was really interesting for me to consider was when we think of what is the hand of grace, it's sort of the synchronicity of things that you start to kind of put together maybe after the fact. And one was Richard Freeman used to have that tiny little Nataraja in the studio. And the last class I taught before I left the studio to kind of pursue my other studies was Nataraja. And I remember our dear friend Dee West saying to me after class, wow, Jeannie, do you think that Guru Maya is calling you? And at that time, I was like, I'm not a guru follower. And of course, Guru Mai is, if anyone's listening and doesn't know, she's this exquisite master on the planet right now that also has been a teacher to many of our teachers, or at least in the lineage of the Kashmir Shaivite lineage. And so I went home and I really pondered that. I was like, wow, and I had had darshan with Guru Mai, with my cousin, my Grateful Dead cousin in Los Angeles when I was in my early 20s. And I thought, what is he into now? And I look back on this as the hand of grace, to have darshan with Guru Mai. And then there I am in Chidambaram with Douglas Brooks, at the feet of Nataraja. I've been to that temple now 4 times. So it's like, what is that? Sometimes we can't even explain it rationally, the hand of grace. So I think this is a beautiful concept to consider. And then, of course, I love that you brought in the mala, the karma mala, because it's like, we think we're the driver in life. And I don't think I really understood that concept until I met Neelakantha, right? Until I
Mhm.
started to meditate and started to really experience firsthand surrender,
Mhm.
to surrender inside and to let the mantras start to the mantra practice work on us rather than we impose ourselves on it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
always such an interesting dance, effort and surrender. It's just always such a, like, how much do you bring forth versus letting it happen more organically. I know in my first year, the thing that happened to me was with my first year when I got the practice of Neelakantha meditation, I made a vow that for a year I would do it and then assess, where I was. And after that year, I hadn't had any great experiences or, I think we all have this sense of what meditation is like, that it's going to be, explosions or, whatever, seeing stars or rainbows or whatever we think it's going to be. And instead, what I found for myself is that I felt like in my yoga teaching, I was getting out of the way more. Like I could open up to something, a deeper well of wisdom inside, and just let that flow through me rather than my usual modus operandi of really trying to control it. And it's still a struggle for me to find that balance. But yeah.
So I'm curious about that. I'm curious about like the malas in connection to that. Like I know for me, part of that driver is maybe part of my wounding. It's part of where I don't trust. Or remember asking Paul on a retreat, like I feel like I'm going deeper, and then there's like a stop.
Mhm.
And I was like, is this the mala? Are these the malas? It's like, it's the Vama current. We say that Vama current wants to like shoot us back to the surface, which is necessary. And then, we learn to stabilize more inside when we're meditating, and are able to kind of sustain it a bit longer, and to go in and really trust that the hands of grace, the hands of consciousness, the spanda, the vibration that is behind everything has us.
Mhm.
And I experience that, and then I also experience the pushback
The
of,
contraction.
yeah, of that the ego, I would say, really being frightened of dissolution.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think there's many, many ways that the tradition talks about this cloaking, contraction, whatever it is that covers our heart. I mean, the different traditions have different ways of talking about it. The Yoga Sutra, talks about the kleshas. And, in the Tantras, we talk about the malas, which for people who may not be aware with the concept, the idea is that, there is this absolute, unlimited, omnipresent, omniscient, absolute consciousness that embodies as us. In that process of us embodying to kind of take on these limited bodies, we get covered by these malas. And the anava mala is the root mala, which is this sense of separation. That when we were once unlimited, we become limited. And there's just this sense that we're less than full, and that can be a good thing because that makes us seek out teachers. I mean, that's, I think, what has been motivating us, all along, Jeannie, is that we knew that we have this sense of a little lack, and so we know there's more, and so we seek out the teachers and the teachings to help us overcome that and to feel, more full. But in the process, there's just a lot of push and pull. We in our practice, we're able to move into these more, greater states of awareness where there is a more expansiveness, and yet there is a part of us that wants to hold on to what's familiar, and what we know rather than going into the unknown, which is kind of scary. So I think that there, that's part of our whole unfolding of the process of our practice is to be able to, start letting go, letting go, letting go. And again, this is something I've contemplated a lot, like, how do you let go? I mean, it's like, what do you do to let go? I mean, because I've thought about it physically, how sometimes in Shavasana, people will say, okay, contract and then release. So there's that contrast. And, so I think part of our process is seeing the contraction, you know,
Mm.
is noticing it. And so that's what you were just articulating so beautifully, that you get to a place where you see that there's a wall there, there's something that's stopping you, and then our work is to just keep practicing and
Mm.
have some faith again that grace will come in. We can't make it come in.
Well, I love the, Cindy and I both are acharyas of Neelakantha meditation practice, where we have learned this exquisite, as many of you know listening, and some of you probably don't know, is that, we have spent many years studying and practicing and come to a place where we both took this teacher role on. And now we offer a mantra practice to individuals that are also seeking their wholeness. And I think that when I think about this idea of surrender, which we've been talking about, is when I'm able to give myself, my personality and my body in a way to my mantra. It's like, we favor the mantra, we bring the mantra to the awareness, we begin to repeat the mantra in a very gentle, easeful fashion. And over time, the mantra just starts to have it's the driver, really. That's what my experience is like. Oh, okay, this thing is actually doing me, and that's not always the case. Sometimes, it might feel like we have a little bit more effort as we go into practice, but over time, this mantra, which is just really just made of vibration, right, is really driving the show. It's consciousness. So I think it's a really important concept today. I think as we face, if we want to call it the Kali Yuga, the end of the Kali Yuga, this time of enormous separation that we are facing on the planet, this concept is so important to healing, right? Is that, we have got all these different people all over the world in a fractured state, thinking that they're better and they should have this land and these people should not, and so therefore let's just annihilate. It just seems like this concept of melting, sort of going back to that, melting and merging with consciousness is what heals us from this feeling of separation, of feeling lack, feeling unworthy, doubt, shame, all of this stuff that keeps us separate from each other.
Well, that separation is another one of the malas, right?
Bringing us back.
So yeah, the Anavamala, of course, has this progeny of, this sense of separation. So there's a sense of differentiation, and then there's the sense of separation. And I've thought a lot about this because, in my former life, I pursued a doctorate in social psychology because I was very interested in prejudice. Like, I grew up in the 70s when there was a lot of busing and, integration was happening. And I was part of that whole kind of racial strife that was happening, which was very confusing to me because also, my dad was in the military. I was a military brat, which was fairly integrated in a way. And I went to military, some military schools overseas with other military kids. So there was a lot of diversity. And when I came back to the States and there was all this busing going on. Anyway, that's a long story, but it's near and dear to me and my whole journey. And then I as I pursued academia, I was trying to find a getaway to fix it. Like on the surface, what can you do to get people to see that we're connected? And I
Mm.
came to realize that you can't. That it's hearts and minds. And that's why I quit academia. One of the reasons why I quit academia to become a yoga teacher, because I really felt that we all have to come back to that place of connectedness first within ourselves, and then seeing the connectedness of, all beings.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's ultimately for me why I teach meditation is because people sometimes have this misunderstanding that meditation is about withdrawal from the world. Like we get on the mat and we, there's this whole contemplate your navel thing. And, what good is that for the world? Well, the thing is when you can connect to your heart and come into these, and what's also happening through the process of meditation is you're clearing out all of the goop that keeps you from having a clear connection with the heart. And so when you can get a quorum of people who are starting to do that, we can really start shifting the world
Mm.
energetically. And again, I really, we have to have laws and we have to do everything on the surface of life that is necessary. But ultimately, the practice is to support our lives so that we can be of service and be effective in the world. It's not about withdrawing. There is a beautiful renunciate path, as and that has its own work and ways they work and benefits and so forth. But for those of us that are householders, we have this very simple, Neelakantha meditation is a practice that you can do while you maintain your householder life. The only, point of withdrawal really is to sit in meditation and close your eyes for a few minutes each day. But other than that, the idea is to go deep, connect to your heart, clear out everything that gets in the way of clearing out the heart so that you can bring your heart out into the world
Mm.
and be your best self and do your best work in whatever domain that might be, because there's so much work to be done.
Mm. Well, I think this is a good point to make, that Neelakantha is a Shakta Shaiva tradition,
Mhm.
which to me is really important.
Shakta
Because
Shiva.
Shakta Shaiva, Shaiva.
Yeah.
And I love the women's circles that I'm in and partake in, and the beautiful teachers I've been around. And I do think there's a bit of a misunderstanding about meditation being just up and out, as we were speaking about earlier, that transcendence isn't going to solve anything for the world, right? And so what I've been trying to clarify, and maybe you can help me because you're so good at this, is that the transcendence isn't other than us, right? Transcendence is what we're actually freeing up and allowing that eventually to come through our senses, right? It's an awakening of the Shakti, and the Shakti can actually start to move these impediments out of the way, because we're raising the vibratory rate inside. And then as that starts to open, it's actually going to go the other way and actually come back down into your feet, right? That's why the God, we revere the goddess's feet. Why? Because they're your feet. And I think that the misunderstanding has been hard for me, because when I sit and listen to teachings that are suggesting that people shouldn't meditate, like you shouldn't sit down and close your eyes and sit in silence, well, we have to have the right practices, right? And we know this. We know the difference because we have a direct experience of that. But maybe someone that's listening is like, well, that just seems like I'm just sitting and I can't do anything, and I'm just, am I just escaping my life? So maybe you could help me clarify this for everybody as well.
Well, there's a lot to say about that, as you know. I mean, one of the beautiful things that we are privileged to study with Paul Muller-Ortega is, the teachings of Abhinavagupta. And one of his primary teachings is that of upaya. So there is this idea that, different strokes for different folks. Different people need different practices. And there is a path that is kind of a spontaneous awakening. And wouldn't we all love to be one of those people and not have to do any practices? But really, it's, these more subtle things are for a very limited number of people. So most of us actually need to have some very concrete practices. And so that's why, the meditation is so useful for us. And, in Neelakantha meditation, we start out with these meditation practices. It is the Stamba practices, but then, as you move along the path, there are other methods that we bring into our overall sadhana. Now, what's I think very difficult where you started with all that is this idea, it's such a paradox, this idea that the absolute consciousness is transcendent and immanent. It's out there, but it's us as well. And it's not separate from us, even though it feels like it is. And so, the whole game, really, the play of consciousness is for us to, settle into these deeper places where we can access an awareness of that consciousness. And what's different, I think, about Tantra, we're using this word Tantra, but really we're talking about our lineage of Tantra. Because there's many Tantras. But what's different is, and I think this is part of the problem out there in the yoga world and the world in general, is that, if you take a teacher training, you learn about the Yoga Sutras. And that's maybe the Bhagavad Gita, maybe the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and that's as far as it usually goes. And so the Yoga Sutra is a renunciatory text, and kind of the highest limb there, it has the 8 limbs. Everyone knows about that. The highest limb is samadhi, which is this state of kind of a quiet kind of empty space, where you may not even be aware that you're there. Okay. So Tantra comes along and says, yes, that's an important stepping stone on the path, but there's more to it. And the more to it is critical, in terms of what you were just speaking about. And that what happens is that eventually that awareness you have an awareness of yourself as the divine. And then you start seeing that everything is divine. This is a higher state of awareness where you're able to step out into the world and interact with the world from a place where you see that not only am I it, but you're it too. And again, that's how I think we can start changing the world.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think even mythically, we think, oh, Shiva's on the mountaintop, right? Shakti's on the earth, right? And he won't come off the mountaintop, right? This is sort of classical yoga in a way. It's like transcendence is up and out over there on the mountaintop, and you're here on the earth. But actually, yeah, I love the myths because they do come and they meet, right? They come and they meet and then they forget each other and they go away. And that's kind of our process of forgetting and remembering. But what I've realized through Neelakantha is that what some people might call the divine masculine is not separate from you. That is actually is revealing itself more and more and more to me as what we would call the Sakshi Bhava, right? The witness consciousness. So becoming more and more and more aware, as you were saying, and eventually, what the Tantric tradition gives us is that vision of Jivan Mukti, that we can live awakened moment by moment in life. And can you imagine a world where people were in that state of oneness And it doesn't mean that we're not in duality, but we're moving about as individuals in seeing through the eyes of the universal. I mean, that is it's a beautiful vision, and sometimes people think that's silly and not something that we'll ever see in our lifetimes. But we have to live for that now, and we have to be responsible to co-create that.
Mhm. Yep. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
I
And
mean, sometimes I feel like, there's a reason why we're here. I mean, we chose to embody at this time and place so that we can, I really feel that the yogis, I just made a little video I'll be posting soon about this. I really feel that that we're here to be the light bearers, because there's so much negativity in the world right now. And so, can we shift that? Can we meet that with positivity, and meet the hate with love, meet the divisiveness with unity, and really try and shift things.
well, I
Because
love that.
Paul always talks about, it's darkest before the dawn. And so here we are awake at the dawn. So what are we going to do about
Yeah. And
it?
so I think that to bring this into some like even practical ways of, not getting stuck in our patterns, I think we have to have a practice, most of us, because the patterns are so strong, the malas are so strong, the pain body, Eckhart Tolle calls it, right? The samskaras, the memories that we all carry are so strong that unless and we have this beautiful teaching, maybe you could dive into a little bit around the ledge of freedom.
Mhm.
What does it mean to stand on that ledge of freedom and make better decisions that will lead to a better future? Do you want to dive in a little bit on that?
Sure, but just to back up, just to give a little
Yes.
for my book,
Yes. Yes.
which is
Let's plug
called
the book.
Align and Refine, the journey of yoga and meditation, which fell out of my years of study with all of these beautiful teachers. And, it's the thing that I struggled most with in the book was trying to say some of the things we're talking about, like what is consciousness with what is the big energy? How do you think about that? And so the way I structured the book is to really try and give that a light touch and let people come to their own conclusions about that, and then describe, as I was talking before, about how we get cloaked as individuals, and then yoga, our practices, is what helps us begin to come home, really come back to our hearts. I had such a hard time to figure out what words I wanted to use for our innermost self, for the big energy. And so in the book, I just decided to use all kinds of different words, because I think people get hung up on the word, like the word God, or, whatever. So, and one of the things that, was beautiful about Paul's teaching to me was that I had kind of, through some of our other studies with others teachers, come to this conclusion that the Yoga Sutras weren't very useful because it was a renunciate text. And Paul kind of gave that text back to us, I feel, because it really is a beautiful description of how yoga works, because it describes very clearly the process of how meditation creates, this addresses the kleshas, as I said before, these obstructing forces like ignorance, and how it addresses our samskaric patterning. The idea is that we all, through our life experiences, have kind of embedded in us all of the actions and reactions that we've experienced in this life, and they serve to kind of be a filter through which we see everything, and they can kind of block our access to who we are inside. And the process of meditation burns up those samskaras and creates a more sattvic, a more sweet and light and luminous being for ourselves. And when once we become established, a little bit at least, in a more clarified place, then we have that opportunity to pause on, as you said, the ledge of freedom. And, I start the book actually with that story of Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield, because I've always been fascinated with this idea that there are these two warring armies, which is just a metaphor. I mean, where's that it's happening in the world all over the place, this divisiveness, and this battle is starting, and these two characters come to the middle of the battlefield, and it's like this freeze frame, you know everyone stops except them, and they have this conversation for 18 chapters. And that's kind of how I think of the ledge of freedom, where there's this moment in the course of the battle of our life, all of the challenges we face, where we can pause and access a place of self-awareness, really, of seeing what's really happened, be able to just take a breath. And what happens, I think, is when we meditate more, we're able to, first of all, see when we're being, off. And secondly, just kind of mentally decide to go inside for a moment and connect into a deeper place, rather than, again, reiterating, some horrible pattern that just leads to more suffering for everybody involved. So that ledge of freedom, the other way I think about it, both of us love to hike, is when you're climbing a mountain, and you come to a place where you can pause, take a breath, and actually gain a bigger perspective. You can see where you've been, maybe where you're going. And so it's just that opportunity to actually exercise our freedom, rather than our suffering and our samskaric patterning and our conditioned responses.
It's such a great way to think of it. It's like just hiking, taking a pause. And I was thinking about how I experience this more and more in what Cindy is talking about, this clarified state, that we call it the soma value. We have more of this energy flowing in us. It actually is very, very calming to our nervous system. So we're actually in a more of what we call sattvic state that allows for that pause. And I directly experience this, not always. I'm not a perfected sadhaka, but I aim to. I aim to be more and more, and I do feel more and more space, more spaciousness, less reaction. Even if there's reaction, I can see it. Like, oh, my heart is beating now. Oh, wow, I'm getting upset inside. I'm like you said, you're going inside and you're observing that. That witness consciousness is bigger, whereas, we're not just kind of just reacting out of that pain body.
Unconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, that ledge of freedom is so important to creating the future that we want, we each desire, the future self. If we take a moment, we go, what is it that I envision for myself? We did the peace practice last night here, and it was like that envisioning of who do you want to be, and how do you want to contribute to this world, is so important, not only for what's going on, but for your own trajectory in life. So, I have as I know you do, a strong desire to live at a higher state of consciousness, to be a better person, to exude more kindness, to be more spacious, and I'm not always. I have an elderly dog that is pooping all over the house now. It's just like I have to consciously say, she can't get out the door. So how are you going to treat her now? It's like, that might seem silly, but it's actually what's going on. It's not easy. Some people may have screaming children, or, an elderly parent they're taking care of. How do we hold hold that spaciousness inside. We have to change the trajectory of those impulses to react. So this is what this practice does.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we do want to change the world is as it is, and we have to learn how to interact with it gracefully.
Yes, as best as we can, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm curious how, if we talk about a little bit more about this incredible book that I am using in my mentorship program right now, Align and Refine. I was so delighted. I knew this would come out of you. It was like, I can remember the day that John Friend shouted, Cindy Lusk, what is, I don't remember which, 2 point something in the Yoga Sutras, and you
Yeah.
knew it. You knew it. I mean, there's like a little glimpse into, like, he didn't just randomly choose someone. He chose you
Mm,
because he knew you knew it.
mhm.
I remember it distinctly. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
she's got it.
Well,
She's got it.
okay, but I'm going to follow that up and say the next day he did the same thing and I freaked. It was one of those situations where I didn't, drop down and just let it come up. And I couldn't remember, even though I knew the aphorism. And so it's interesting. I learned from that as well. I
Yeah.
really learned that it's like when we're on the spot, how to dive in rather than trying to like grasp on to how do I look and can I remember and all of that.
Yeah, it's like all
Anyway.
that shanka, right? That shanka coming
Yeah.
up, doubt, even
Yeah.
though you knew it.
Mhm.
It's like the covering, right? The
Mhm.
fear.
Mhm.
I know this feeling myself. I still
Yeah.
have it. I still have it.
Anyway, I interrupted you, but I just had to set the record straight on that.
I was just gonna
Because you
say
remember
though.
that, but I remember me screwing up.
Yeah, I don't remember you screwing up at all, which is interesting, right? What we take in,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
what I was going to say was that, your devotion to philosophy came on early.
Mhm.
I remember you just, clarifying things in the Yoga Sutras. I think I even took a course with you.
Mhm.
So it's like it's in you. You have got this Saraswati writer, creator, like a strong speaking quality to you that the world needs.
Mhm.
And so I find that this book is, as I said earlier, it's not a dumbing down at all of these concepts, these high concepts of yoga. And it's in bite-sized form that is tangible and relatable. And
Mhm.
my students are like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to understand this concept for the first time.
Mhm.
So,
That's music to my ears. Yeah,
yeah.
my goal really was, you know, how we had the three A's in Anusara. Well, my three A's are authentic, accessible, and applicable.
Mm,
Because I really, this is why I didn't dumb it down. I have the original Sanskrit there.
yes.
I have the aphorisms there because and I kind of separated them out so that those who are interested in it can go into that, or if they want to ignore it, they can ignore it. But for me, being true to the teachings is, really something I hold very important. Yet I want it to be applicable and
Mm,
accessible. So I tried not to dumb it down, but to bring it to life, to the best I could. And one of the ways I made it applicable is one of the ways I made it accessible is, as you said, bite-sized pieces. I tried to keep the chapters really short so that it could even be a daily, anaga, if you will, a daily teaching. Um,
yeah.
and I made it applicable in that almost at the end of every chapter, I put a reflection, reflect and explore. There's some exercises, but mostly it's just some reflections for you to try and apply the teaching to your life. So,
Mm. It's so
That's
great. It's so great. And I'm having fun because I'm even kind of overlaying this into the
mhm,
goddess's stories and Lakshmi and Purna and for wholeness and,
mhm,
the experience of Soma. And if you're listening, you might not understand all these concepts, but this idea of what is wholeness connects to this goddess sitting behind me, Lakshmi. So it's been fun to take your book and assign a chapter and then have them explore the idea of what is soma in many different ways, including the body. We've been having some fun with some Ayurveda and some bathing and oil and really taking care of the body as well. So I'm curious now if we could just spend, I know we're almost there at time, but I have this sort of burning desire to ask you, you are a scholar, you are a high teacher, and as a woman, this has not been the easiest for women to take their seat as scholars, as a scholar and practitioner, which is really the highest. You got to have both. How is it for you to be a woman at this time, having written a book? Um, do you find it supportive? Or is it frustrating? Or
mhm,
as a woman who is as you know, I am deeply committed to reviving her story in the history of yoga.
mhm,
So I think as women, how do we take our seat
mhm,
and hold that uprightness in ourselves, knowing, as I told you earlier, I'm in a course with Christopher Wallace on the chumas, which were written, where they weren't actually written at first. They were an oral tradition that was through women.
mhm,
And I'm very interested. And then I think there's a piece for both you and me to feel the strength of what is it like to put this out be a female at this time.
mhm. Well, I'm going to start with the usual female thing and deflect my accomplishments and say that, I'm a scholar in that I've studied, but I'm not officially a scholar of religion. My PhD is in, social psychology. So I've never been formally trained, but I've studied for many years, probably in a more traditional way and that I did study Sanskrit, and because I had this illusion that I was going to be able to translate things, and Sanskrit is very challenging. I know just a tiny enough to get myself through, but I really defer to the scholars on some of the true scholars. But on the other hand, one of the things I found most interesting, and we were talking about this briefly beforehand, is like most of the people who are teaching philosophy in the world of yoga are men. There are a few women, but mostly they're men. And so, it was for me, it just came down to what one of my friends talked about was legacy. I'm at that point in my life where I feel like I have been studying for decades and decades. I've learned a little something. And what happened is I taught in somebody's teacher training. They said, come in and do, a weekend workshop on yoga philosophy. And I'm like, okay, what, like it's vast. And so at the end of that, workshop, I had written all this stuff on the whiteboard and I looked at it and I said, that's a book. Like that's kind of the encapsulation of what I've learned and how I see it all fitting together.
Mm.
And so, um, it's been an interesting, I mean, the book writing process was the easy part. Getting it out there was a whole other thing. And I went through a whole process of working with trying to publish it. And, it's like so much today. In order to publish a book now, you have to already have a big following, which I couldn't really demonstrate. So I self-published. And so it's actually been a little frustrating to get it out there. But I really feel like the people who need to find it are going to find it. I mean, that's kind of what I come back to. I did my best effort, my due diligence. It was this is kind of my baby, in this lifetime. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that some people find it, yeah, I think that's enough I need to say.
Well, it's still not easy
Yeah.
for women to come out and be, and even if you don't call yourself a scholar, you're a high priestess of knowledge. And I give you the bow of Saraswati, because I think this is why I wanted you to come on to the podcast in part was to bring attention to your book, to your work, to your years of dedication. And some of the greatest teachers are hiding out in their homes, right? Like they're not dancing on the stage somewhere.
Mhm.
And that's just the Kali Yuga.
Mhm.
Richard and I talked about that the other day. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to you because I see you. I
Thank
see your brilliance. I see this book. I'm so delighted. It's really, really thrilling to see your friends' talents come into fruition. And I think that that's part of this practice,
you.
right? Is that we get tapped into the talents and capacities that were maybe there, but maybe hidden somewhat or occluded, or maybe we didn't feel worthy enough to put something out. I know I can still go there. Um, and you've done it.
Thank you.
So
Well, right
yes.
back at you. And see this, this is one of the things that I think Paul has talked about that, I think we're in a time. It may be that people are hiding out, but I really also feel like the mega guru time is past and that there's a lot of smaller little communities, each, working within their domain. And, like I'm attracting a certain type of person to my work, and you're attracting people who are resonating to what you're offering, and other people are doing their things, and we do things with those people too. There's so many people making all these different offerings, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think for me, as yogis, whatever domain we're working on, if we can just continue to have these conversations and support each other and just bring more light into the world, because it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to meet a certain form. I think that there are many entry points. I mean, this is something that Douglas and I used to talk about all the time when he would joke about, oh, yoga is just becoming stretching in Sanskrit. And my argument would always be, yeah, but that's an entry point for Americans, to come in through the body. And then once they get a little taste, then, they'll want to dive deeper. And
Mm.
I think that we see that in our students all the time. Both of us have been asana teachers for a really long time as well, teaching the yoga postures. And I think that's a beautiful entryway for many, many people.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
still do it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Take care of the body, prepare for meditation. Um, well, I just wanted to end with just saying that I do feel like the practice is working on me. I feel so much more expanded. I feel so delighted, truly, truly happy for you that you put this together. There's no sense of like, yeah, of course, I'd love to write a book. Maybe you can help me. But it's not like there's no sort of tit for tat or one-upmanship or, it's just this pure delight that I have. And I find that's happening more and more, just like the delighting in other people's gifts and not trying to be like them, right? Just to be who we need to be.
Yeah.
And that's what this practice reveals. Our meditation gives us the strength to see who we are. And we may struggle along the path. I've definitely struggled. But to start to trust that the Shakti is indeed guiding us, and that you are worthy, as Douglas would say, unto your own potential and gifts. That you needn't look further than yourself, right? It's like, and then you need to have a practice that really begins to weed out these feelings of unworthiness and inadequacy and maybe too much pride that kind of covers up the wounding. These things have to go in
And the
order for us.
comparison and the divisiveness.
Yeah, in order for us to really have true dialogue, true sisterhood. It's just, that's what has to happen. And so I'm super delighted that you took time to come on to this podcast, and everyone should go out and buy a line of Fine and leave a review for
Yeah,
Cindy.
leave a review. 5 stars, of course.
5 stars, yes. Any final remarks for our listeners?
No, just, as Judy said, both of us offer this beautifully accessible practice of meditation. And, I just really feel this is what the world needs these days. And so hopefully, for any of you who aren't yet meditating, we're inspiring you to, find a teacher. You really need a live teacher, I feel. I talk about this in the book a little bit, about finding a teacher. There's a whole appendix on that, but it may not be one of us, but
Studying a little bit. Yeah, study and
yeah, I
practice.
mean, there's so much more to yoga than yoga asana, and this has been, Jeannie's and my path is to kind of uncover that and to then bring it forward to other people. So, if it's not with us, hopefully you'll find someone along the path to connect with and to teach you these deeper teachings from yoga.
Yeah, and tapping into a householder path, if you are living in the world, it's really important that you do tap into the proper practices that will amplify your purpose here today in the world. So thank you, my dear sadhana sister.
Oh, dear Jeannie, love you so much.
Love you so much.